It is my incredible honor to introduce Kate. I'm just astounded by her talent and by the work that she has done. Her paintings are in so many private collections and museums. She's painted the portrait of the governor, which hangs in the Vermont State House. New Hampshire State House has one of her portraits, the Thurgood Marshall Federal Judiciary Building in Washington, the Vermont Law School, Phillips Exeter Academy, Middlebury College, Norwich University, Green Mountain College. The list goes on and on. Private collections, not only in this country, but in Europe. So we are just thrilled to welcome Kate this afternoon.
Great, because I'm signed up for it too.
Remind everyone to please mute themselves. Then we'll be able to just hear Kate as this meeting is being recorded. She is currently in her studio in Vermont, and she's currently at work on two installations. I think she's going to tell us a little bit more about that this afternoon. So thank you so much, Kate, for doing this virtual studio tour for us, and welcome. Thank you.
All right, I'm unmuting. Not all of you are muted. I'm hearing some background noises, and at some point I will be sharing a video, and because of bandwidth, it's really important that you be muted. Not that
I'm going to keep my eye on the muting because I can mute people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm zooming in from Middlebury, Vermont, where we got 20 inches of snow on Friday. And I'm going to just turn this camera to show you the view out my studio window. You can see the garden shed, the hen house, the wood shed. And now I'll bring you back in. And I just want you all to know that if you asked me what my favorite kind of light was to paint in, it's winter light, it's now, it's when there's snow on the ground and everything is light. I even like bright gray snowy days better than sunny snowy days. So this is my favorite time of year to paint. So thank you for coming in on your cold and icy and snowy day. And I have a quick round of thank yous. The first one, which is to Anne Havemeyer, your fearless leader, who's wonderful to work with. And Eileen Fitzgibbons, who's been bugging me since the beginning of the pandemic to do a studio talk. And third, last but not least, my wingman, John Barstow, Norfolk native, who my adult art students all call Giovanni. He's my audiovisual aide. He's my loyal partner in all things creative. And today he's going to be my cameraman as we navigate the geography of the studio. A couple parts of today, I'm going to screen share and show you images. And another part, he will be the cameraman, and we will actually tour around my studio, and we will try to move the computer slowly enough that you don't get seasick, okay? So I'm going to describe actually not 2 arcs of work, as Anne said, but 3. And we'll just start in with the first set of paintings, which are still lives. I've been making still lives of antique tools. Then we're going to move to the large portrait that I'm making of Francois Clemmons. You'll hear more about him in a second. And the third group of paintings are from a set of paintings called Witness Marks. And right now, 48 of these little tiny panels, which I've made out of, eventually there'll be around 200. They're currently on exhibit at the Lamont Gallery in Exeter, New Hampshire. But more on that in a second. So now I'm going to try and screen share. And I'm going to this image. And I'm very bad at things digital, but you are now about to participate in this. How does that look, Annie?
That looks great. Perfect.
All right. So here we go. All right. And there's nothing in the way of this image, right? It's just the tools.
Yes, it's just the tools.
Great. Okay. So before I get going on this particular painting, I want you to know that the first painting of tools I ever did actually happened 40 years ago in Norfolk, Connecticut, when Grenville Garside loaned me some of his precious antique woodworking tools. I was entranced by their shapes, and I also loved learning from Grenville what they were used for and why he loved them. Last fall, I was part of a show at the Kent Museum in Calais, Vermont, with many other artists who were looking in diverse ways at the tools and the technologies of the 19th century. I borrowed blacksmithing tools from the Henry Sheldon Museum in Middlebury and other tools from the Kent Museum. Neighbors and friends from as near as White Pine Lane in Middlebury to as far away as Portland, Oregon, loaned me tools. And I am continuing this cycle of paintings. Part of the reason why is alchemy. Toolmaker 1, which is the painting you're seeing here, presents a set of 6 blacksmith tongs made by Middlebury farrier A.B. Smith, who had a blacksmithing shop next to the Middlebury Inn for 50 years, ending in 1937. Horseman, artisan, businessman, Smith was famous as the farrier who specialized in fabricating custom horseshoes. I think of him as the Imelda Marcos enabler of horseshoes. To do that, he created and fabricated specialized tools, tongs, hammers, even a patented hoof clipping machine. And in my painting here, Smith's tongs acquire personalities, acrobatic in stance and pose, even though they began as simple iron rods that he heated and hammered into being, each with a unique shape. So of course there are unknown and imagined, for me, stories in the patinas of these tools. Toolmaker 2, this is a set of his hammers, also handmade. Now, I paint all kinds of tools. Sometimes the tools are from the kitchen. This painting is called Luna. And this painting is called Intimations. Usually I paint by natural light, daylight. I'm going back to Luna. This is a daylight painting. Whereas Intimations was lit from above. And so you have a different kind of shadow that's formed from lights above. And it's a little more dramatic. In this painting, which is called The Sport, it's based on a collection of tools sent to me by my neighbor, Peter. And you will note that there is a chisel fabricated from a former file and a wooden branch shaped like a pistol grip. That was not the original hammer, the original handle, and the tool was different to begin with. The natural handle must have fit the hand that created it. Worn and grimed from use, comfortable to hold, the woodworker who fashioned this tool must have felt a thrill at the perfect fit of the handle to the hand, in the knowledge that the chisel would hold its edge well because of the quality steel from which the original file was made. Why the title? In a biological sense, a sport is a mutation or change, and this chisel is a one of a kind. Now, just so you know, my titles are very carefully considered. There's usually a story behind the title. Maybe that comes from the fact I was an English major. Sometimes I have help with the titles. I test them on people. I have a book literally full of lists of potential titles. Now, I also paint garden tools. There are handles to be replaced and dirt, and these tools, as far as I'm concerned, are simply elemental. So the title is Metal and Wood. Now, just down from the Kent Museum in Calais, Vermont, where I was, all these paintings were in a show last September. Just down the road from the Kent Museum is in a small wooded hollow, is the water-powered Robinson Sawmill, built in 1803. While making this painting, I kept imagining the mill pond, back at a time when horses and oxen drew plows, carts, and sledges over the land, turning fields, hauling timber. I wondered, as I realized that the pair of blacksmithing tongs I had just drawn resembled a bittern, making its watery croak, head pointed skyward. I wondered, could there have been American bitterns hiding in the grasses of the mill pond? I named the painting Bittern, and on delivering it to the Kent, I learned that indeed there used to be a pair of nesting bitterns in the mill pond. So the paintings I've just shown you were all up at the Kent Museum, and they have all gone to other homes. And now I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of the tool paintings that I'm working on in my studio right now. And the way we're going to do this is John Barstow is now going to become the cameraman with the computer, and he's going to follow me around. And please give me a signal if this isn't working. All right. One of the things, you're fine.
I can't see you.
I can see you. There, I'm right there.
Make you bigger.
I can't. I don't know how. Annie, the screen share is off, right?
The screen share is off. We can see you and we see some tools behind.
Okay, good. That theme is right there. So you're good. John's holding it. So at the moment, you will see a set of paintings of, these are the tops of pitchforks. And these are all tools that come to me from the Sheldon Museum again. And one of the things that I want to say about the paintings is, for me, it's about the abstract shapes. It's not the tools themselves per se, but it's the shapes between them. It's the shapes in between the tines. And it's also the difference, that's good, John, between the edges. So the tines themselves are obviously hard edged, but what's going on in the wall is of huge interest to me. I have to be honest, frequently it's of more interest to me than the objects themselves. So what goes on back here is a contrast to what's happening here. This cannot possibly pop forward in the illusion of it without my looking at what's going on, okay? So old pitchforks, now I'm moving over here. Does anybody know what this tool might be? This was just given to me by a new friend who saw my work and said, I have collections of tools and I want to show you what I have. This is for when people are cutting ice on lakes. There are these long saws that go in and you cut these huge chunks of ice. And then to keep the pieces of ice from sticking back together again, you jam this in and you can move them around. So the painting is down here. And of course, it's late in the day. And this is not a finished painting at all. I am just blocking things in. Sometimes paintings are more interesting when they're not finished. So that's always a tussle. Over here, the same man that gave me this beautiful ice tool gave me some Cooper's tools. People who make barrels are called Coopers, and these are called travelers. And you can tell the dimensions of the barrel by rolling it around the outside. So there are the travelers, and this is the painting that I have just started to make. And it's a painting on a panel that I made from scratch, and it's covered with plaster. And this is going to be an oil painting on a hard plaster covered surface. And it's early days for this painting. It's a square canvas, and I was having fun playing with circles in squares. Everywhere I am in my studio, there are tools that are on loan. And someday they will be in paintings. Now, I just noticed that Jeannie Jones entered the group, and I'm glad because I am making a painting. Follow me, John. I'm making a painting here of something that she loaned me, which is some very tiny hand-carved antique clothespins. And they're like a little group of people. So the painting here, which is a little larger than life size, is an oil painting on paper. And it's going to be my lineup of clothesline people. I don't know, I haven't got the right title for that one yet. Here are some more ice cutting tools, and this is tongs and a chipper. And again, this is on one of these plaster covered boards that I'm working on. And I will be honest with you, while I love the shape of the tongs and the chipper, I really am looking forward to painting the shadow. The shadow is going to be the point. Now, I'm going to dodge behind this painting while John runs around, and you will be able to see from this larger painting that I'm working on that the same tools, here's the wonderful pistol grip chisel that somebody made. The same tools will appear in the paintings over and over again. It's like a collection of people. And the reason I wanted to show you this painting today is it's about half finished. This side of the painting is more finished than this side, even though all the big shapes are in. What is not happening in here yet are my playing with the different kinds of edges that happen with natural light. Here I've been looking more at what happens as the shadow changes and disappears from shadow to light. Whereas here, this is still pretty crude. And it means that even though this is not a multi-dimensional setup, the illusion of them being three-dimensional will be better when I've explored the range of colors and edges. So it's always fun, John, come around to the edge to remember that it is just a painting. It is not real. And people say, well, you're a realist. And I'm saying, it's not all real. It's all abstract. It's all an idea. In case you're interested, there's my palette, my brushes, and now I'm going to bring you back over to the place where I share my screen from. And I hope that didn't make you seasick. So now I'm going to go back to screen share and back to the PowerPoint. Uh-oh. Share. There we go. I'm assuming everybody knows these people. There's Mr. Rogers in a very, very famous, iconic picture of him bathing his feet, and then he washes the feet of Officer Clemmons. And Francois Clemmons came to the Norfolk Library. I think we came just before the pandemic. Anyway, I am working on an enormous painting titled The Shoulders We Stand On of Dr. Francois Clemmons, who is my neighbor. Clemmons, a tenor vocalist whom I have accompanied on piano, was catapulted into the public eye as Officer Clemmons at a time when Black individuals did not appear regularly on children's TV, and they certainly did not appear as policemen. As a tenor, Clemmons is gay. And while Fred Rogers knew that and loved him just the way he was, Mr. Rogers felt the country was not ready to know about that aspect of his identity. So even though Clemmons was groundbreaking in his role and in the work he was doing, he was not actually free to be himself. As a tenor, Clemmons has devoted his life to singing, teaching, and preserving the legacy of the American Negro spiritual. Following his BA in music from Oberlin and an MFA at Carnegie Mellon, he won a position in the Metropolitan Opera Studio and was the first African-American singer to integrate several opera companies in the Midwest. He won a Grammy for his vocal recording of Sporting Life from Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. And in 1980, he founded the Harlem Spiritual Ensemble. In honor of this work, Clemmons received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Carnegie Mellon. In the portrait that I am creating with Francois, Clemmons will be framed in a canvas 6 feet wide by 8 feet tall in a king's robes from Africa, over life size. He will be, in my portrait, himself. A couple years ago, we went to Tennessee for a concert. Here, Francois stands in front of a portrait of the Fisk Jubilee Singers, who left on tour in 1871, just after the Civil War, to introduce the world to the spiritual as a musical genre. In the process, they raised the funds that preserved their fledgling university and then permitted the construction of Jubilee Hall, which was the South's first permanent structure built for the education of Black people. I love the fact that this first building for the education of Black people was built with funds from music, from the arts. The huge painting in the background of Francois was commissioned and paid for by Queen Victoria. Here's an early watercolor study that I did to prepare to paint the portrait. Francois and I spend time together talking about identity, artistic practice, and how we as human beings forge authentic connection. There's no question that my life has been easier than Clemmons's by virtue of my skin color, economic status, sexual orientation, and identity. But that doesn't mean we can't truly connect through our work together and through our art. I always ask this question: how do we know what we know about each other? That question informs both my portrait work and my life. And now I'm going to stop this share and we're going to go back on tour of my studio. And because the light is starting to fade, I'm going to turn on the lights and then you will see the size of Francois. So here we are with this enormous canvas that's 6 feet wide and 8 feet tall, and it's on a little bit of a slant because I haven't got an easel to hold it. If John brings the computer close, you will see how enormous he is, and I've actually had to buy scaffolding. The scaffolding is on wheels. I wheel it in and out when I'm working on this. The drawing for this canvas has taken months and months. The canvas and the paints and the brushes, all of it has been funded by the Vermont Arts Council and the Vermont Community Foundation. Here is the robe that Francois will be wearing, and I have it here so that I can refer to the color and the pattern. because there's no way he's going to stand for me for the number of hours that I would require for the painting. His dog, his little dog Princess, is down below, and she will have a fluorescent pink collar. And just for fun, so you understand the scale we're talking about, over here in my drawer where I have sketches. Oops, hold on. Here is a preparatory sketch of him. And you can see how much larger it is than I am, which it would be anyway. And this is an oil on paper preparatory sketch that I use. I'm not going to predict when this painting will be done. I've actually been working on it for years. And to be honest, the painting is but the sort of the tip of the iceberg, because I'm envisioning it as being an installation with a sound component, because he is a singer and a storyteller. So a sound component and probably a video component as well. So let us just say it's a project that's in process, and there will be more to come. So I'm going back now to my screen share. And I'm going to take you to the third project I'm working on, and then we can open up for your questions. So what you see in front of you is the installation of there are 48 very small panels. And this is a project I've actually been working on since my dad died 7 years ago. This installation, the little paintings, it's about 4.5 feet tall, about 10 feet wide. And it's on view right now at the Lamont Gallery at Phillips Exeter Academy. On either side of it, there are 2 speakers, and through the speakers is a soundscape that I commissioned from professor of music at Middlebury College, Peter Hamlin. And it's an electronic score that he created by taking the objects that you see in the paintings and rubbing them or blowing on them, or, well, you'll hear, we're going to run the soundtrack a little bit later, to create tones and vibrations and sort of subliminal noises that might somehow resonate with the idea that, well, the question of where's memory stored? So let me tell you where the project came from, and then maybe this will make a little more sense. So witness marks, anatomy of a memory, came out of watching my dad slowly lose some of his brain function over the last few years of his life. He knew he was losing it actually before we did. And as was his style, he quietly decided to study what was going on. He amassed a library of books on the structure and function of the brain. And knowing I would be interested, he would call about his newest discoveries. He knew he needed to carve new neural pathways, and he knew his brain was plastic so that it could, except he never figured out how. I own many of those books now, and they're full of his margin notes, the words he had to look up, and exclamation points, because he was constantly amazed. Each of us is who we are in large part because of what we experience, what we learn, and what we remember. But how does the brain actually physiologically create memories? Where are they stored? And can you actually picture someone's mind? As I watched my dad struggle to capture memories, I began to wonder if there was a way to create a visual experience about how memory might work. And in the last weeks of his life, as I drove back and forth from Vermont to Connecticut, symbolic images began taking shape in my mind. And that's the genesis of this project. Witness marks is a metaphorical portrait of a mind that will include at least a couple hundred small oil on panel paintings to be installed in a pattern that will somehow evoke neuronal structure. The paintings will be paired with the commissioned electronic musical score written by composer Peter Hamlin. My medium here is oil on traditionally made poplar panels covered with linen, gessoed with a chalk ground, referencing traditional icons, which were originally religious objects, but now populate our cell phones and computers in today's digital world. Each panel has a hint of border of hand-applied gold leaf in varying widths. The imagery contains 3 arcs: human developmental stages from birth to death, the layers of a painted image from substrate to finished painting to deteriorating image, and an arc of human cultural development. Now, obviously, these are personal icons, and yet I imagine some will trigger memories for you as well. If a personal curiosity cabinet or Wunderkammer could contain the images of my history, Witness Marks explodes the curiosity cabinet into a looping, pulsing linear form that can be walked through and experienced in real time. As the icons will trigger different memories in others, the metaphor of the ever-changing neuron is alive, and each set of viewers becomes part of a new logarithm. I'm going to leave you with a quote from artist Vija Selmans. If you really look at something, it stays in your memory. Then memory does other things to it. Sometimes it stays, but sometimes you have to run back and see if you remember it correctly. It's actually alive. And I'm beginning to suspect that everything is simply ephemeral. So what I'm going to do now is show you a little video that I made of the 48 panels. And we're going to share Peter's soundtrack, which is very delicate and very beautiful. And I'm definitely concerned that as it goes through the ether and is sort of reduced into your computers, the sounds may be a little rougher than you would expect. And so if the sound bothers you, turn down your volume, okay? In the gallery itself, it's a pretty otherworldly experience. So now we're gonna go to this little video and let's see what happens. Okay. Oh, there was no sound. Darn.
No, there was sound. I think you inadvertently muted yourself for a little while, so we lost.
But I was worried.
Back.
Yeah, I was worried there'd be interference from my computer. So anyway,
Oh, it was
we
perfect.
haven't perfected that yet. Sorry.
No, it sounded perfect, Kate. After you unmuted,
All right.
we could
All right.
hear it well.
Apology. Yeah, it's really interesting with the sound. Anyway, at this point, I would love to take questions, and Anne, I don't know if how should we do this? Should people raise their hands, or how do you like to do it?
Well, if you can put your questions in chat, I think that's probably the easiest way. And then if you would, I can call on you, and if you care to unmute, please feel free to do so. But otherwise, we might have everyone talking at once. I just have a quick question to start things off. Was it difficult to pick the 200 iconic objects that are memory triggers?
Oh, I'm still picking them. I've only got about 60 of them going. So no, it's not difficult at all.
Draw on your own memories, basically? Yeah,
but it's a layered memory. I want to say it's a family history memory. So it's based on stories. But, I'm going to follow. I'm finding it easier right now to focus on childhood memories, say, than adolescent memories or memories from my 20s. So I'm also started asking myself, well, why is that? And I don't know the answer. But this is going to take a while to paint. So
Betsy, do you want to unmute Betsy Garside and ask this, or I can easily ask it?
Sure. Nope.
Good. There's
Hi,
Betsy.
Kate.
Hey,
Hi
Betsy.
from Santa Fe.
I know.
So how many pieces are you working on at once? And how do you know which to work on any given day?
Okay, that's a great question. So sometimes it will be connected to what kind of light. I have morning paintings, I have afternoon paintings, I have bright day paintings, I have gray day paintings. Okay, so that's one basic thing. Then there will be things like deadlines. Deadlines are good. Vitamin D, vitamin deadline. I have a deadline of March 15th for the current group of Tool still life paintings. So I'm pretty much focused on them. I do not have a deadline at the moment for the Portrait of Francois Clemmons, but that's based on also he and I now setting up sittings, laying out the touring schedule, things like that. I had hoped it might be done this year, but I actually have so much other work that it may not be finished this year. I've got quite a few portrait commissions that come with deadlines. Then the other aspect of it is it's depending on my mood and what I feel like painting and what is inspiring me that day. So it's never purely business-like. I mean, deadlines are useful for commitments that I've made, but then there are the other things that I just want to paint. In the drawer that I opened where I pulled out the sketch on paper of Francois Clemmons' head, it's also full of oil paintings I made last spring when things were blooming outside. And what will I do with those paintings? I don't know. So there is a little bit of a flow that is connected to what I'm reacting to that's happening in the day or the world at that particular time. And I hope that doesn't sound too flaky, but that is the reality.
Makes sense.
Great.
Thank you.
Susanna Wood?
So I wanted to ask how you decide what materials to use for your canvases. You know, why the plaster for the square ones, for example, and how you suit the canvas type to your work.
So there is a little bit of practicality. The small panel paintings, which have plaster on them, the gesso, they are heavier because you don't want gesso on a substrate that might move with the weather and crack. And so they tend to be heavier. It would be a really big deal to have a panel made that was 6 feet by 8 feet. I mean, it would have to be cradled. I would be really nervous about working on something that big that was made out of wood and plaster. So at that point, when the paintings get bigger, I move to canvas. And I like to paint on a fairly fine weave, and I like it primed with an oil ground. It's slipperier. I like how it feels on the brush. And so there's the practical matter of the weight of the item. Do I have a preference? I really love painting on gessoed surfaces. I really prefer what happens with what can happen with the paint. So oil paint is this beautiful medium that can be transparent and thin or thick and impasto. And so it has this incredible plasticity and range. And when you apply it to gesso, that is the chalk surface, it acts differently than it does on an oil primed piece of cloth. And that has to do with absorbency. And that's just something that it's hard to describe, but if you do it, you would know it. And so sometimes, depending on the subject matter, it feels like it's just going to be more appropriate for me to paint it on the chalk ground gesso surface. Some of the sketches I'm now working on are in a new kind of specially sized paper that takes oil paint. And that's new. And the beauty of that stuff is you can travel with it. You could travel with these sheets of paper. They're not heavy. They don't take a lot of room. You can roll them up, put them in your knapsack, put it on a drawing board and make an oil painting. And then when it's dry, you can attach it to a board. So now I'm making oil paintings on paper, but they're really more for travel. So Susanna, did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Kate.
Okay, thank you for the question. Oops, Anne, you're muted.
Joanna is wondering if the entire exhibit eventually will be at the Exeter Gallery, and where do you sell your tool paintings?
All right, so the tool paintings are at the moment on sale at the Edgewater Gallery in Middlebury, Vermont. And the Edgewater Gallery has 3, if not 4 venues right now. They have one up at the Pitcher Inn, which is in Waitsfield, in Warren. My wingman is getting me right here. I love this. It's in Warren. And then they also have a gallery out in Montana. So, and they have 2 galleries here in Middlebury. So at the moment, they've done an amazing job placing these paintings. These paintings, there's some in California now. There's some in Washington State. I don't know how they do it, but they do. It's nice. The little tiny paintings that are at Exeter, my hope is that they are going to be at the Kent Museum in 2023. I have to finish the couple hundred of them by then. So there's a deadline. Watch what happens when that deadline gets real. Because this particular space, the Kent Museum, we could set it up like a memory palace, if you know what that is. And we are in discussion right now as to whether that might happen or not. So stay tuned. Something will happen. You'll notice that I referred to working on this project for 7 years. In a way, this project is like constructing a book, and books don't happen quickly. They go through stages, and they sometimes get edited, and they sometimes get tested. The group of paintings that's up at the Lamont Gallery at Exeter right now, for me, in a way, is a sort of a beta test. I want to see how people react to the combination of sound and visual imagery. And I'm waiting for feedback. I want to see what happens. So it's emerging. Let's just say it's emerging, and you should stay tuned.
Wonderful. I see that we have one raised hand. John?
Hi.
John Hartshay.
You mentioned that you do commissioned portraits. Could you talk a little bit about those, and do you have any that you can show us?
Oh, I didn't put any in the slideshow, but you can go to my website, which is just kategridley.com. And on the website, you will see a lot of portraits, including Governor Jim Douglas, including, who else is there? A couple of the people that Anne mentioned, as well as portraits of children and portraits of friends and private collections. And the other portraits that are that you can see on my website belong to a set of portraits that I made of emerging adults. They are, actually it's a show that's been traveling through the country since 2014 called Passing Through, Portraits of Emerging Adults. And on the website, if you go to Passing Through, these are 5-foot tall portraits. They're 60 inches tall, 30 inches wide. And each of them has a sound portrait with it. So if you click on that portrait, John, you will get 2 to 3 minutes of this young person talking about their dreams, their wishes, their hopes, their disappointments, their struggles. It's pretty interesting collection. And that set of portraits has been used in educational settings and community settings to inspire dialogue between groups of people and discussions about identity. So I'm sorry I didn't include pictures today of those, but I thought we had too many other things. But everything is available to be seen on the website. So thank you for that question.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Sorry, can you tell our group a little bit? I was so intrigued by the woman whose portrait you painted that now hangs at the New Hampshire State House.
Oh, this is a woman named Marilla Ricker, and this was a posthumous portrait, which isn't usually the thing, because I like when I make a portrait of someone, I like to spend time with them. And even though I use photographs as reference material, I find that the sittings are what breathe the life into the portrait. And really the paintings become the record of time spent together. So I'm going to be painting someone this summer, and we've already started meeting and looking at things together and talking about ideas. And while she's talking, I'm looking at her, and I'm figuring out things that I can do to make her portrait as authentic as possible. But the woman I painted for the New Hampshire State House came about. I was contacted by the New Hampshire Women's Bar Association and the New Hampshire League of Women Voters, because they had noticed that when you walked into that State House, there were no portraits of women on the walls. Funny thing, they were all old, dead white men because they were the people occupying positions of power. So Marilla Ricker had been a suffragist, and she was the first female lawyer in New Hampshire. And as such, she was the first woman to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court. This was back in the I can't remember the dates at this point. I didn't prepare for this. But the other thing is that she had married. She was known as a free and independent thinker. She'd had a very unusual education, homeschooled, but she was taught well by her parents. Her husband had died when she was about 30, leaving her a very wealthy woman with property. And she used to walk down to the town to pay her taxes and say, you really should allow me to vote. This is taxation without representation. And she argued that for 40 years. So women got the vote in this country in 1920. She died shortly after the first opportunity to exercise that franchise. And it's not known whether she actually cast a vote or not. But they had a very tiny, and I'm talking 4 by 6 inch lithograph for me to create that portrait from. So I had to research clothing of the day and what she would have worn. And she was very unusual. She actually did not grow her hair long and wear it up in a bun. She had short cropped hair. And at the time I made the portrait, I had short cropped hair. And so the portrait in the State House has my hair. There it is.
I don't know if you can see.
She has a little ornament on with a flower in it. It's called a tussie mussy. And she's wearing a cameo brooch that actually came from my mother's side of the family. The dress is a dress that I used from one of the women at Seneca Falls when they met for their convention about getting the vote. So it was fun to construct a truth that now lives on the State House walls that little girls see when they come in, little boys and girls see when they come into the building, and they can see that women could occupy a position of importance.
Could you hold it up again without Kate talking so that we can actually see it on the shared screen or on her screen?
I was on the speaker view. Can you see it now?
That's good.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful, Kate. We've had a couple of comments in the chat about thanking you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed it. You're fascinating, your work, your chosen projects, your use of light. Thank you for inviting us into your studio and your world. And as Kate said to me earlier, well, nothing beats the real thing. This is, it gets close, but I'm so looking forward to being able to see these works, actually see the actual works and in museums that they're in or galleries. And it's just, I'm just continually just totally astounded by your talent as a conceptual realist. I love the way you described that too. That's really, really wonderful. So thank you so much, Kate. I don't think we have any other questions. Just lots of thank yous. We have recorded this program, and if it's all right with Kate, I'd love to post it on our YouTube channel. You can let me know, Kate, if that's all right with you.
And anything is fine. And thank you so much for having me today.
It was just great. Let me just ask you one quick question before we close. Was the portrait of Francois commissioned by the Vermont Arts, or is that it was your? And
No, this one's my baby,
Okay.
and he and I hope will travel it, and because I've accompanied him on piano for years, and we've worked hard on music, and he's helped me with music. And I finally said to him one day, I think it's time for me to paint you, and you're going to be my assistant. And we are going to collaborate and make something beautiful and powerful together. So we'll see what happens.
Do you know where it will live?
Oh, we have several ideas, but I'm not spilling those beans yet. So you will hear. Thank you so much.
We'll wait with bated breath while you proceed with this enormous project. Wonderful. Can't wait to see it finished.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day, which is getting darker now. So thank you, Kate. Thanks, everyone, and hope to see you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now.
Thanks, Kate.